The Beguiled 1971 director. Don Siegel, writer. Albert Maltz, Irene Camp, starring Geraldine Page, Elizabeth Hartman, Pamela Ferdin. This gothic psychological thriller features Eastwood as a Union soldier during the American Civil War who is imprisoned in a Confederate girls' boarding school. Geraldine Page magnificently plays the repressed head of the school, who decides to keep Eastwood locked away. Eastwood begins to ignite sexual feelings among all the women at the school, which leads to disastrous results. Sofia Coppola recently remade the film with Nicole Kidman and Colin Farrell, to much less successful results. COOGAN'S BLUFF 1968 director. Don Siegel, writers, Herman Miller, Dean Riesner, Howard Rodman, starring Lee Jacob, Susan Clark, Don Stroud. It was a while into his career before Eastwood began to be regarded as a serious actor with range. The smart thing he did, while he was still learning the ropes, was to surround himself with more versatile actors with emotional ranges larger than Eastwood's. As with Geraldine Page in The Beguiled, here he is paired with the great Lee Jacob, and the two lift the film from its genre roots. Eastwood plays an Arizona police detective in New York to bring back an escaped convict. High Plains Drifter 1973 director. Clint Eastwood, writer. Ernest Tidyman, starring Werner Bloom, Mitchell Ryan, Stefan Girish. High Plains Drifter was the first Western film Eastwood directed. Eastwood brings dry humor to this story of a gunfighter and drifter who helps a small-town band together to fight off three outlaw gunmen who are on their way to the town. The Bridges of Madison County 1995 director. Clint Eastwood, writer. Richard Lagravines, starring Meryl Streep, Annie Corley, Victor Slezak. Eastwood directed and starred in this adaptation of the best-selling novel about a photographer photographing covered bridges who meets and has a brief affair with an Iowa farm wife. This is one of Eastwood's most vulnerable and sensitive performances. Some critics described him seeming a bit intimidated by Meryl Streep and all of her famed artistry, but that actually works for the film, since Eastwood's perhaps real-life insecurity working with the legendary actress carries over to the character, who is a bit intimidated and awkward with the intensity the woman loves him and his inability to express it in return. For a few dollars more 1965 director. Sergio Leone, writers. Luciano Vincenzoni, Sergio Leone, starring Lee Van Cleef, Klaus Kinski, Jean-Marie Vollant. This is the second film in Thedler's trilogy, which were all directed by Sergio Leone and introduced movie audiences to Eastwood, who had previously made his living on television. Eastwood stars with Lee Van Cleef as two bounty hunters who are both tracking the same man, so they decide to team up. A British journalist named Kim Newman made an interesting point with the observation that the film changed the way bounty hunters were viewed by audiences. It moved them away from a profession to be ashamed of, one with a ranking lower than a card sharp on the Western scale of worthwhile citizens, to one of heroic respectability. Hang Em High 1968 director. Ted Post, writer. Leonard Freeman, Mel Goldberg, starring Inga Stevens, Ed Begley, Ben Johnson. This was Eastwood's first starring role in a Western that wasn't directed by Sergio Leone, and the first one that he produced with his own production company. Eastwood plays a man who is mistaken for a cattle rustler and nearly lynched when he is hanged from a tree. He survives the incident and then is offered a law enforcement job and sets out to bring the men who nearly killed him to justice. The excellent supporting cast features two Oscar winners for Best Supporting Actor, Ed Begley, who won for The Sweet Bird of Youth in 1962, and Ben Johnson, winner in 1971 for The Last Picture Show. A Fistful of Dollars, 1964 director. Sergio Leone, writers. Victor Andres Katina, Jaime Comas Gil, Sergio Leone, starring Marianne Koch, Jean-Marie Vollant, Wolfgang Lukshi. Eastwood's first starring role in a film came in this the first film of the Dollars series and his first collaboration with Sergio Leone. The movie launched a genre that became known as the spaghetti westerns, meaning they were films about the American West directed by an Italian director. The film's violence mixed with its somewhat campy humor confused a lot of critics at the time and reviews were decidedly mixed. One fan of the film though is Quentin Tarantino, who described the film as the greatest achievement in the history of cinema in a press release for the film's 50th anniversary screening at the Cannes Film Festival. Play Misty for Me 1971 director Clint Eastwood, writers Joe Hyams, Dean Reesner, starring Jessica Walter, Donna Mills, Clarice Taylor. Eastwood scored big time with his first outing as a director in this superb thriller. He plays an overnight radio disc jockey at a jazz station who becomes intrigued by a female caller who frequently phones the station asking if he'd play Misty for me. He then meets the woman in a bar, has a one-night stand with her, and then is terrorized by the woman's increasingly clingy and violent behavior. You could say that the woman develops a fatal attraction toward Eastwood, since the plot of this film and the 1987 blockbuster Fatal Attraction, starring Michael Douglas and Glenn Close, have remarkably similar plots. Eastwood has said they basically remade his film without giving this film any credit. Eastwood is wonderfully matched by the superb Jessica Walter as the obsessed fan. She earned a Best Actress in a Motion Picture Drama Golden Globe nomination and should have been nominated for an Oscar, but was inexplicably left out. The Outlaw Josie Wales 1976 director Clint Eastwood, writers Philip Kaufman, Sonia Chernus, starring Chief Dan George, Sandra Locke, Sam Bottoms. Eastwood directed and stars in this western with a much darker tone and edge than the spaghetti westerns that made him a movie star. He plays a farmer whose family is murdered by militant Union soldiers in the American Civil War. To seek vengeance, he joins with the Confederate Army, but when the war ends and his Confederate comrades are all murdered upon their surrender, he goes it on his own to fight his pursuers. E. Harry 1971 director Don Siegel, writers Harry Julian Fink, Rita M. Fink, Dean Reesner, starring Harry Gardino, John Vernon, Andrew Robinson. Eastwood found one of his signature roles in this film, Harry Callahan, a relentless San Francisco police inspector on the trail of a psycho serial killer. The film would spawn for sequels. This bit of dialogue when Harry stares down a punk Beckham, one of the most famous bits of dialogue in movie history. EIGER. I know what you're thinking. Did he fire 6 shots or only 5? Well, to tell you the truth, in all this excitement I kinda lost track myself. But being this is a .44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world, and would blow your head clean off, you've got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do ya, punk? The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly 1966 director Sergio Leone, writers Agenore, Incrocci, Furio, Scarpelli, Luciano Vincenzoni, Sergio Leone, starring Eli Wallach, Lee Van Cleef, Luigi P. Steele. Eastwood once again teamed with Sergio Leone for a spaghetti western. This, their third outing, proved one of their most popular pairings. Eastwood is joined again by Lee Van Cleef, and this time also co-stars with Eli Wallach in a very popular performance as the Rat, a fast-talking Mexican bandit. The film's reputation grew as the years passed. Roger Ebert admitted he initially only gave the film 3 stars because he felt spaghetti westerns were looked down on, but in later years he would revise his opinion of the quality of the film. $1 Million Baby 2004 director Clint Eastwood, writer Paul Haggis, starring Hilary Swank, Morgan Freeman, Jay Baruchel. $1 Million Baby was perhaps the most acclaimed movie of 2004. It received 7 Oscar nominations and won the awards for Best Picture, Best Director for Eastwood, Best Actress for Hilary Swank, and Best Supporting Actor for Morgan Freeman. Eastwood was also nominated as Best Actor but he lost that award to Jamie Foxx in Ray. The film tells the story of a young woman who aspires to be a professional boxer. She forms a deep bond with her trainer Eastwood that takes them through both triumph and tragedy. Unforgiven 1992 Director Clint Eastwood. Writer David Webb Peoples. Starring Gene Hackman, Morgan Freeman, Richard Harris. Unforgiven was widely seen as the culmination of all that Eastwood had learned doing westerns over the years. He dedicated the film to his mentors, directors Sergio Leone and Don Siegel. The film took a more serious look at the violence often portrayed in westerns, and Eastwood wanted to show the human toll such violence takes on people. Appropriately, Eastwood plays a gunslinger who comes out of retirement for one last job. It was nominated for 9 Oscars and won 4 of them: Best Picture, Best Director for Eastwood, Best Supporting Actor for Gene Hackman's villainous sheriff, and Best Film Editing. Eastwood was also once again nominated for Best Actor, but lost that award to Al Pacino for Scent of a Woman.